Okay, I thank you for the kind introduction. I'm happy to be here. I'm somewhat proud that I could provide some knowledge for the questionnaire. But the questionnaire was done by Vitas and his colleagues, so I gave some input, but I have seen first result, and it's a very, very exciting and fascinating project, and I think the first in such a research deep for these countries. So this is wonderful, and I'm looking forward to work with him for more papers. But let me come to what you like to hear. I have titled it Shadow Economies in 7 Eastern European Countries, Latest Results and the Need of Microestimates. This is not because we are doing this. This is why that I'm more and more convinced, as useful as these macro figures are, which you will see in a few minutes, they have also a lot of disadvantages. Yeah. With one figure we know something. We have just a figure about the size in, let's say, your country. That's it, full stop. But we do not know who is working, to what are the motives, etc. So I will come to this. Yeah. The macro figures are important, and all this research started with, what's this? No. Oh, sorry, could you help me again? I made something wrong.
I don't know. Oops.
Aha, okay. Yeah, so what I would like to share with you is, after some introduction, again, a bit of theoretical considerations. Then the size of the shadow economies is a special focus of the other Baltic countries and Eastern and Central European countries. Latest results up to this year. Then the need of microestimates. Why do we need this? And finally, some policy measures against the shadow economy. As I said, this is still, and this is for me fascinating, I do not know any topic in economics which since the end of the 80s is on the agenda, sometimes more, sometimes less, in a lot of countries. Yeah, so, and lately also in the discussion of tax evasion combined with legal tax avoidance, it popped up again, and especially during the last years where we had a severe recession all over Europe, to a different extent, of course, from country to country. The question of tax losses through shadow economy activities again popped up and was a very, very hot topic. Yeah, some people and some researchers make it themselves very easy. They just take the size of the shadow economy and say this is the tax loss, which is absolute nonsense. I say this with intention. Yeah, the size of a shadow economy is a value-added figure, and it causes tax losses, but never to the size. Yeah, thing is a bit more difficult. But what we also have, unfair competition between those firms who use shadow economy work and those who do not. Yeah. And we also see that the reaction from politics quite often is increase effective punishment and you get rid of the shadow economy. Yes, you can do this, but whether it's so successful is another story. So what would I like to do with you in this lecture? I would show you some latest result of 7 Eastern European countries. You see which one in a minute. I will analyze the most influential factors, driving forces from a macro perspective again. The need of microestimates, as I said already, and some incentive-orientated policy measures against the shadow economy. I say, and I'm from time to time heavily criticized to this, a shadow economy per se is not bad. It creates value added. It increases welfare of people. It has severe negative effect for the state or for a government due to tax losses and mostly social contribution payment losses. But if you repair a house, if you build a house, if you repair a car, if you give an extra lesson to a pupil, in the shadow you produce a value added. Whether you like it or not, it is so. Yeah, and that is also why a lot of people, even in those countries where one would normally assume people are very correct, like Germany or like Austria, have no bad feeling when working in the shadow economy, because they think they work, they do something, they produce something valuable, and not rob a bank or take drugs. Yeah, so this is a different perspective, and that is why I strongly focusing on incentive-oriented policy measures. That is shifting shadow economic activities into the official one. Then all are profiting. The same value added is kept, and the state gets at least some taxes and social security contributions. That is why I stick to this definition. You have seen a similar slide 2 years ago, I'm aware, but there's not a number of new people here. And this definition is now used from most international organizations, for most countries, yeah. It's the legal production and provision of goods and services that are deliberately concealed from public authorities for the following reasons. I don't read all the reasons. You see these, they are obvious. I'm aware that a shadow economy is, you can't make this strict, yeah? But I try to differentiate from classical crime activities, from the informal household economy, but we have overlapping areas, yeah, with the underground economy, for example, prostitution, smuggling, for the informal house economy, do-it-yourself activities. And quite often do-it-yourself activities, you do it yourself. Some people like to do it, but other people think, I save a lot of money. It's the same motivation, whether you do it yourself or you hire a shadow economy worker, yeah. So, this definition, I think, is useful and holds for 80%, 85% of the shadow economy activities. And also what we see from the questionnaires, a lot of people have an official job and work after their job in the shadow economy, over the weekend, in the evening. So they fully care the tax burden and all other things in their official job. They do not declare their black extra hours. Yeah, I'm not saying this is right, but only saying to put the picture in the right face. Not so that a shadow economy worker doesn't bear the full tax load. He does it in his official job. The difficulty is also, and this is also one reason why macro figures, can include a lot of other activities, and which are quite difficult to compare from country to country. For example, to compare your size of the shadow economy with Belarus is quite heroic, because what type of economy has Belarus? A market economy? Certainly no. A pure blend economy? Certainly not. Something in between. Yeah? And it's a completely different political system. You would all agree, at least to this. Yeah? So what you measure there is, in Belarus, for example, a typical parallel economy, partly motivated from shadow economy activities like you have it in your country, but partly due to other reasons. So, and also, so this shows you, and as we have these overlapping areas, yeah, that to get a true, whatever this means, macroeconomic figures is almost impossible. All figures have their flaws, all figures have a certain error. Now, if you look how to measure it, I will be brief on this and the last time I put more time on it, yes. One is a direct measure, which the Institute is just doing or has been done. It's now we are looking at this data. I will come to this in an extra part of my lecture. But mostly indirect measures 2 and 3 are used, mostly indirect measures are used. The most prominent one is certainly the currency demand approach, a simple idea. If you work in the shadow economy or let work done in the shadow economy, you pay by cash because it doesn't leave a trace if you do it in a clever way. So if you could estimate a currency demand function or currency outside banks, the currency you and I have in your pocket, in our pockets, and if you could isolate this from all factors for which you normally use currency, like buying a newspaper or whatever, making some shop for the evening, some gross for the evening dinner, then and then you need extra currency for shadow economy activities. And to approximate this, you include in such a function the reasons why people work in the shadow economy, a tax pressure, regulation, and from this you can then isolate this and get the amount of money which is needed for shadow economy activities. If you multiply this by the velocity of money, you get a value-added figure. The last one here is the mimic procedure. Again, we treat a shadow economy as a latent or non-observable variable. And you have a number of causes which influence why people work in the shadow economy, like the direct, indirect taxation, regulation, tax morale, people's attitude against the state, unemployment, GDP per capita. Yeah, you see the theoretically postulated sign, and then you have certain indicators. As most prominent one may be change of local currency per capita, quite tricky with the euro to get per capita figures for the different countries, or the euro outside banks in your country, and others. Then the average working time, employment quota. Big disadvantage of this procedure is that you only get out the relative estimates. You need a calibration procedure to transfer this in percent of GDP or in local currency units. So it's always a combination of a mimic and a currency demand method, or another one from which you have figures. You could also use surveys, for example, if you have figures from surveys. So that's the way how to do it. And as I said, the currency demand method is used to calibrate the relative estimates from the mimic method into absolute ones. Now, as I said, the driving forces are tax and social security contributions. Quite often, if one has data, one can treat them separately. Quite often they are treated as one variable. And of course, as the hypothesis is simple increase in shadow economy activity if these tax pressure, including social security contribution, increases. The same with regulation. Public sector services, the opposite. The better public sector services, the more people are willing to pay taxes, the worse they think, why should I pay taxes if I get nothing from the government? In principle, you make here a contract. You give the government your tax money or your money the government takes from you, and you expect from the government good schools, good streets, public infrastructure, whatever. Yeah. And if this tax treaty or implicit tax treaty is violated, then quite often what happens is that people say, why should I pay all this if I don't get it back? And then say increase their shadow economy activities. And quite often one can say shadow economy activities are the tax rebellion of the middle and poor income class, because that's the only way to do it. They have on average little possibilities to evade taxes compared to richer people. Also, quality of public institutions. Here, quite often one takes as a synonym for bad quality of public institution corruption. If corruption is a normal thing, like it is in Bulgaria and in Romania in a lot of cases, then it's a different situation whether you trust the state, whether you think you are doing a good job, if you have to pay twice. Yeah. So that also increases then quite often shadow economy activities, because you see no reason to do it in the official economy. As I said, the lower the tax morale, the lower people have no good meaning from the government, the higher the probability to work in the shadow economy. The other one are obvious. If you are unemployed, you try to get extra money by working in the shadow economy. And if you don't earn a lot in the official economy, of course, you want to have an extra income. And you can have it by working in the shadow economy. Now, just to see you how such a mimic estimation is looking like, yeah. I don't want to go into detail here. We can do this in the discussion, or you can ask me in the break if you have specific questions. But you see that the higher the taxes, the higher the shadow economy, the lower tax morale, defined in the other way around, the higher shadow economy, the higher unemployment rate. Same with business freedom, if they're again defined in a different, in the opposite way. The higher business freedom, the lower shadow economy. Also self-employment rate, self-employed people have more possibility to pay taxes, so the higher the self-employment rate, the higher can be shadow economy. Always using ceteris paribus, rule of law, GDP growth, education, and corruption, which has in this thing now the statistic is significant. If you look at the indicators, we see currency in circulation per capita is just statistically significant, maybe the effect of the euro, and to have a good measure of cash in the single European Union countries. But we see it as an official labor participation rate again. It works. Now what comes out, maybe this is of most of interest for you, for 31 European countries, and this is a projection for 2015. You can calculate a shadow economy up to 2010, with other estimates you can do it up to 2013. But as you have all the values, unemployment, tax pressure, or good projection of these values, you can make an estimation for 2015. Yeah. Now, if you see, we have Bulgaria, Romania as the top countries, around 30%. Then we come to two Baltic countries, including yours, Estonia, Lithuania, around 25%. Latvia, Poland, about 23%. Hungary, about 21%, just to name a few eastern countries, which are all about the average of these countries. Now, if we make a time perspective, I think this is a more fairer picture. Just to say, really, as I said, these are macro estimates. The situation is different from country to country. You can only make a rough comparison, yeah? And I'm always thinking not to show you a point figure, but to show you a confidence interval, maybe true, but it's more difficult to read. I want to emphasize this. It's the same data set is used, the same estimation procedure, but that is all. The vast difference in countries, of course, by a lot of institutions are not captured. So if you look now over a longer time perspective from 2003 to 2015, you see, if I focus a bit on your country, you brought considerably down the shadow economy from 32 to 25.8%. Again, this is a macro figure, and one disadvantage of all macroeconomic estimation procedures, whether you use a currency demand approach or a mimic approach or a discrepancy approach, is that normally the material which you need, for example, for construction for shadow economy worker is quite often legally bought, is included here. So if you want to have the true value added, for Lithuania, your shadow economy activities might be around 20%. And this, I show you competing figures from another method in a second, where you see where it is for some Baltic countries lower. So this is a macro figure. This is a maximum, one could say, which is connected with shadow economy activities. Yeah. Also, if you have a part of smuggling in it, which normally does not contribute to GDP, you had to see whether you get a figure, and you said you can get it out. So this is, one should clearly say this, and one should clearly say there is, for all of these countries, a strong downward trend over the last 12, 13 years. Here, you see now also, you see with confidence intervals, you see things are much more difficult to read. Yeah, and here is an index approach by Putin's and Sauka, who use some type of a micro approach and then make a figure for the whole country is coming from the value added of labor. Yeah, and of course there is no, as I said here, no material included, and if one compares it, yeah, it is considerably lower. Yeah, it again, as all approaches have the advantages, disadvantages. Not so clear in this approach how much shadow economic activities within firms is included, but at least you see that I don't show you only my figures, which might look crazy high for you. There are other figures also in using a similar method, and here in this one might be able to make a better comparison. Yeah, my figures are the yellow ones. Yeah, here we have a similar downward trend. Yeah, in Latvia the procedure is quite close to mine. Yeah, not in your country and in Estonia. Yeah, and if one would now, if you will be able to calculate a macro figure from the just finished survey in your institute, we might get something which is maybe in between the two figures, or which might come closer to Putin's and Sauka. But these are the only series at least I have to make a comparison, and you see for some countries the difference are vast, almost half, yeah, or half of mine, and for Latvia not, for your country again half, yeah. So that you get an idea, and that one has to treat this with care how large a shadow economy is, and it should make some sensitivity with you how useful is a macro figure. Yeah, it's nice to have it in the newspapers, but that may be all. What is relative impact? Yeah, I try to decompose it and to standardize it. Yeah, which are the driving forces? Yeah, we see for all of these 7 Eastern European countries, indirect taxation is, or maybe the driving forces, followed by unemployment, yeah, and also followed by self-employment. So labor market issues are quite crucial here. One sees here that is indirect taxation is also pretty high. Is it not a type of no-nah result? Yeah, if you have high indirect taxes, no wonder. Yeah, to see this. Yeah, and personal income taxes are less influential than in a lot of Western countries like Austria, Germany, or other ones. Yeah, so one sees here One shouldn't overinterpret the results, but it gives you some idea that indirect taxation is a driving force, unemployment, self-employment is, but also followed by tax morale. It's also not for all years this data is available when the European Value Services. I'm aware of this, so again, one has to be careful in interpreting this. If one tries to make a calculation of the pure tax evasion out of this type of shadow economy, one here sees that also we have a strong downward trend. Of course, this follows shadow economy result. It goes for your countries up to 2010 and maybe now lower. I'm just making new calculations up to 2013 because here I can only use not forecasts but real figures so that I have the actual tax rate. It will go down to 2.5% of GDP. So this is something. Every finance minister would be lucky, would have this money, yeah. But you can't make this easy calculation or say, oh, if we wouldn't have a shadow economy, the tax increase would be, takes the last figures of your country, 3.2% for 2010 would be higher. No, then you have to carefully investigate whether shadow economy activities and official activities are complements or substitutes. If they are complements, and if people would not do it in the official economy because it's too expensive or they wouldn't like to afford it, one could, so it's not so that if you make the unrealistic assumptions there is no shadow economy, taxes would be so much higher. Roughly 40% of this figure or 30% you couldn't seriously calculate. So also here, but it is an indication that tax evasion out of this is a sizable number. You see, now why do we need microestimates? You see, you as I said, you get some figures, you get some ideas, you get some development over time. But that's it, full stop. Yeah? You have an overall catch-up figure for a whole country. As I said, often crime activities like prostitution and smuggling are included, yeah, or other illegal activities, at least to some extent. And legally bought material used in the shadow economy is included because in the measure this can't be differentiated. And if you consider this, macro shadow economy figures are overestimated by 30%. And also often activities of illegal immigrants are included, yeah, where you have no idea how much it is, but they are. So the direct estimation, micro ones, which are direct estimations, are needed if I want to have a detailed analysis and are urgently needed for every government action. Yeah, you have to have a good knowledge how Lithuanian people see shadow economic activity, whether they have a bad feeling or not. Yeah, if they do not have a bad feeling, then maybe punishment is not as effective as you wish. Yeah, so you need also to have microestimates, and you need to have detailed knowledge on an individual basis. Of course, a survey estimate has also disadvantages. It's not the ideal method, where one can say there is no ideal method. They underestimate shadow economy because not all people say you the truth, and many people saying you is the same in Austria and Germany. Oh, I work in the shadow economy, but they don't give you how the real extent of how much they work. If they work 10 hours, they might answer you, I work 7 to 5 hours or something like this. Yeah. One has to make structured interviews face to face or using computer surveys, which equally good work nowadays. So that is, and one has to make cross checks. Yeah. quite often firms are left out. Yeah, so you ask individuals and you do not ask firms. A disadvantage which might become overcome if you do it every year or every 5 years, you have only a point estimates. Now we have detailed knowledge for 2014-15. Hopefully we can do the same thing in 3-4 years to at least see some movement, whether it goes up and down or how much people's attitudes are changing. Yeah. If you use the auditing method, so you take actual cases where you detect shadow economy activities, you have to, and you want to make a macro estimates, this is another procedure here, that you have to then know the total number, which is quite difficult to get, and you can only make rough approximations. Mm-hmm. The need of micro is justified here, that you get also some ideas about the various economic sectors in a country, and the results are somewhat different if you look in what you have in front of you. You have an idea about the wage rates, yeah, the amount of labor, how much people actually do work. You only find it out asking them, yeah. The demand and supply, people's attitudes for or against shadow economy. Are they satisfied with government services? Do they think taxes are too high? Do they think they are over-regulated? Yeah. Do they trust a government or not? Yeah. Here we see, and the perception whether government is doing a good job is vastly different in these 5 countries. Look in your tables. Yeah, vastly. Yeah, so you see there is a lot of variance in a certain variables which you never get an idea just using macro figures. So you can justify this because one big disadvantage for us social scientists is, and those who have to finance it, to have a micro estimation and to make this investigation is pretty expensive. Yeah, it costs you a lot of money and you're not able to do it every year, quite often. Yeah. So, but then you have a sound foundation and with this detailed information you get only from micro estimates, and from this one you might develop much better policy strategies. What could one do? My last part. Now cash is still used because here and in your northern neighbor Sweden you have a fierce debate to abolish cash. Yeah, quite a fierce. Yeah. Yes, one can do it. I'm somewhat skeptical. My biggest argument against it is not one for or against the shadow economy. Cash is what you only know you have in your pocket and for what you spend it. If you use credit cards, at least the danger is pretty high that everything is kept on a record, and then we know Schneider was in Lithuania, he bought this souvenir, he bought that and that. Yeah. At least if I use my credit card in Austria and I buy what I lately did, 3 shirts, all is stored. Yeah, because the cash receipt is linked to the number. So if they would make an investigation, they would see, okay, Friedrich Schneider bought 14 days ago 3 shirts with such a size and a few information. So, okay. I'm not saying one couldn't abolish cash, but one should be aware that a great privacy area may be given up, even if you do it not in a clever way, that you develop cards which you can use like cash. You can do this, yeah, but I don't see it so much on the agenda. So, and if you abolish cash, obviously transaction costs rise. A simple economic argument to pay a shadow economy worker in cash, the most easiest thing you can do, yeah, and you will have a reduction between 10 and 20%. Because it is not traceable. If I work for you in shadow economy, and if you go with me on next Saturday to the supermarket and your credit card it used to buy it for the amount I have worked in the shadow economy. So you can substitute. It's a bit more, as I said. The transaction costs are rising, yeah, but they won't vanish shadow economy activity. And there is some naive discussion. If we do not have cash, then also organized crime, another area of my research, organized crime will vanish. This is not true at all. It will be reduced, certainly, but if you don't tackle the reasons, it will not vanish. So a government can use the tax side to reduce it. This is easily spoken, difficult to achieve because almost all governments have a deficit problem. So, and we are not on the right side of the Laffer curve that with a decrease of tax rates, you get more tax revenues in. In some countries, and for some rates you do. In Austria, we have the example of the tax on cigarettes. It's so high now that smuggling is so attractive, yeah, that you might do it. But there are rare cases where you have this. So you have a deficit problem, so it's difficult. But one can do something with unemployed, with self-employed, and unemployment may be controlled at least partially by a government in a traditional Keynesian policy, so that at least you can temporarily reduce it. Government can more deregulate an economy, giving incentives to be your own entrepreneur. So then people, if unemployment is falling, shadow economy activities will go down. So a shadow economy can be achieved. You could also use the so-called Luxembourg model, which means that you set out the VAT for half a year, 9 months, for example, for labor-intensive work in the construction area. So if you want to renovate old houses, it's very labor-intensive. On average, the government gives you credit, so if you show me an official bill, you don't have to pay a VAT. And if you only make the assumption a third would else will be done in the shadow economy, the government wouldn't lose money. So this model has been very successfully used in France, in Luxembourg, and in Belgium, for example. Yeah. So there are other measures, but we can do this in the discussion. I think I have spoken long enough. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to receive critical comments from you. Thank you.